Hello again, everyone. Welcome. Welcome back. It's wonderful to see everyone having fruitful conversations during our break. And we are very glad to have you here. So it is now my pleasure to introduce the next panel, structured as a fireside chat moderated by our colleague Zeynep Varoglu, a senior program specialist in the Universal Access to Information section of the Communication and Information sector at UNESCO headquarters. Zeynep oversees the sector's global portfolio on open access to scientific publications and open data, advancing policies and frameworks for knowledge sharing, and innovation ecosystems. Zeynep works closely with governments, intergovernmental organizations, academia, and civil society to foster multi-stakeholder partnerships and promote evidence-based policy approaches. She also leads UNESCO's support to member states in the implementation of the 2019 Recommendation on Open Educational Resources and directs the global implementation of the ICT competency framework for teachers contextualized through OER projects. Zeynep, the floor is yours.
We are actually doing a hybrid version. I'm going to present some of the main concepts, and afterwards, our dear colleague Lisa Petrides, Dr. Lisa Petrides, who is a founder and CEO of ISKME, will be the moderator for this session. So first of all, I'll start just with a brief presentation on the concepts that we're going to be speaking on. Let me see how this works. Oh, I do nothing. Can it come on? Oh, before? Yes, thank you. So I'm going to be speaking to you about global knowledge, the Global Knowledge Commons, and the link between open educational resources and open access to scholarly communications with a link from policy to practice. I'm picking up from the previous speaker, the previous presentation, in the discussion on ensuring collaboration and communication in different areas of knowledge production. Next slide, please. I have to click. Okay. So on the screen is a map of what I'm going to be speaking about. Basically, we're looking at sharing openly licensed knowledge from the perspective of teaching and learning, therefore open educational resources, and a link to the UNESCO normative instrument, the 2019 Recommendation on Open Educational Resources. We're also looking at the relationship between this and scholarly communications and research, and open access, and a link to the 2021 Recommendation on Open Science, which you are all aware of. The idea is that it's openly licensed knowledge used for different purposes, in terms audiences, if you like, teachers and learners, and for sharing of scientific research. Next slide, please. The principle is that knowledge remains a communal good, which is available for everyone, that the open licenses and the structured metadata, aligned with the fair and care principles and the upholding of community rights and cultural contexts, make for it to be a sustainable and inclusive digital infrastructure. It allows for the minimization of duplication, enhances efficiency, and reduces the environmental impact. It's a virtuous circle. Next slide, please. Now on the screen, you have a very large list of all the different declarations, recommendations, guidelines that have had place since, I think the first one is 2012. That's what, 13 years, 14 years. And it's in the area of open science, in the area of open education, in AI and innovation, and in open solutions in general. As you can see, it's a very impressive list. We've come up with declarations, recommendations, ideas of how to go forward. Now, what's really necessary is to bring this together and to have a consolidation of these outcomes and to see how they can work together. And that's the issue that we're addressing today. Next slide, please. The 2019 recommendation was adopted in 2019. Could you click again, please? And it was adopted just before COVID, and it addresses open educational resources, and there is a definition. And it's up here, and it's very important because this is really the parameters in which we're working. It's about learning, teaching, and research materials used for education in any format or medium that's under a copyright that has been released that permits no-cost access, reuse, repurposing, adaptation, and redistribution by others. There's also a definition on open licenses. It basically says that it repeats it's a license that allows you to do what's necessary for no-cost access, reuse, redistribution, adaptation, etc. This is really important because during COVID, what happened, as many of you know, is that a lot of things, everybody was online teaching and learning. And the idea that something that's online for free on a website, go ahead, please use it, etc., means that it's an open educational resource. It's not. It has to be on an open license, and an open license, a most commonly used one is the Creative Commons licenses. If it doesn't have a Creative Commons license, then it's not an open resource. The document has 5 areas of action. It's 12 pages long. I encourage you to read it. It is actually quite straightforward and quite user-friendly. The first one is on capacity building. It's about how to OER, the skills you need. It also has a section on metadata and interoperability, and a section on links to other openly licensed family members, open data, open access, free and open source software. The policy area looks at incentives for governments, for institutions to put in place the use of OER. The inclusive, equitable, quality OER looks at vulnerable groups and how they can be addressed, and also including accessibility for persons with disabilities, and issues of quality assurance, ensuring that quality is the same, if not better, than fully licensed materials. Sustainability in the open access world, it's about financing. And the idea is that it is not the teacher, nor the user, nor the producer who should shoulder the cost. I think you can hear the echoes to open access here. And international cooperation is that there is cooperation between the different parts of the community, of regionally, institutionally, and also between different fields in the implementation of this work. Last year, in November, we had the 3rd UNESCO World OER Congress, where the Dubai Declaration on OER was adopted. This document is a guidance on the use of AI and emerging technologies for the implementation of the 2019 recommendation. It was necessary because between 2019 and 2024, only 5 years, the entire landscape changed in terms of the use of AI and OER. And it was important to move forward and see how openly licensed educational resources can harness this change for the good. Next slide, please. The Dubai Declaration on Open Educational Resources is based on the ROMEX principles and how they would apply to AI and emerging technologies for OER. It's about rights-based, human rights-based, ensuring digital rights, privacy, freedom of expression, openness, promoting open access to information, data, and knowledge, accessibility, and multi-stakeholder participation, and includes also cross-cutting issues such as gender equality and sustainability in digital transformation. Next slide, please. The Dubai Declaration adds a focus on open digital ecosystems, open solutions, and digital public goods, interoperability, machine-readable licensing, of course, as I said, the ROMEX principles, multilingualism, and sustainable infrastructures. Next slide, please. The idea, in a nutshell, is that OER makes research outcomes teachable and accessible. Open access shares research outcomes as scholarly communications. Combined, research, learning, and innovation are shared openly for a wider audience in order to have a larger impact. Next slide, please. The policy levers that are presented here are to integrate national digital transformative plans on OER and open access together, promote inter-ministerial coordination, education, science, technology, to develop indicators for openness, accessibility, and inclusion, to ensure that open licensing mandates for publicly funded educational and research content. All this to break the silos and to have a larger knowledge commons. Next slide, please. The strategic shifts that would be necessary for such a move would be to put the principle of open access in general into practice, to recognize funding for OER and for open access as a digital public good and not a short-term project. In this regard, I'd like to just bring up something that I read recently, citing that if OER, in this instance, was considered a digital public good, it could be seen as by governments as something which is similar to roads and to public water as a public good. That would make knowledge a public good, and you can see where it could go from there. In terms of referencing UN documents, Pact for the Future Zero draft, that open ecosystems as drivers of sustainable development, embedding openness in public infrastructures and linking it directly to AI and ethics and sustainable agendas. As you can see, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of synergies. There are a lot of possibilities. There are a lot of ways to go forward. Next slide, please. In the coming presentation and in this discussion, we will be looking at the principles of equity, which I understand have already been discussed in this discussion, about how open knowledge and open solutions keep knowledge as a public good. Integrity, rights cleared provenance tracked materials to ensure trustworthy AI. Sustainability, shared open infrastructures, lower costs and environmental impact. Inclusion, multilingualism, cultural relevance, and collaboration, particularly collaboration to move forward. This will be the themes that will come up. My last slide. We have a community of people working on open educational resources. It's a dynamic coalition, an internet governance forum dynamic coalition. They share information on open educational resources, activities, and call for collaboration. If you'd like to join, please fill in the form and we'll keep you informed, and you're welcome to join us at this in this group, and also for you to share your information on related activities. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the moderator, to Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zeynep. I'm just curious, by a quick show of hands, I won't be able to see those of you who are online. How many of you have interacted with open education prior, open educational resources, or the communities of open education practice? Okay, some of you have. Great. Well, our goal today, and I just want to tell you, we're going to do as the metaphor where we're going to sit under the tree and have a conversation to talk about conversations, the topics of importance. And so we're going to sit here and have a conversation, a little less formal. As an educator, it felt like the pedagogically strong thing to do here. So what I hope we do in our short time here with you is to have you see how the work that we've been doing, and I'm Lisa Petrides, as Zeynep said. I'm founder of a nonprofit in the US called ISKME, the Institute for the Study of Knowledge Management in Education. And I've been working in the field of open for about 20 years, mostly creating open digital public libraries for open educational resources in the US, for states, internationally, for governments. So that's the field that I've been working in. So I come from the education sector. And what we really want to do today is to show that I think, Zeynep, you said cousins. I like that. You said family. I like to say cousins. I hope we show today how open access, open data, open science, open education, how we're really cousins in the same family. And there's no time like today, given the risks that we've already talked about in these last 2 days, to really come together to bring open as an ethos to the work that we do for the SDGs, the goals, for all of these things that are so important today, for misinformation, disinformation, the concerns around generative AI, all of these issues. It's going to take us together to work on. And so we hope when you leave here, you'll see how much open education is akin to the work that you're doing in open science and open scholarship and open access. So with that, we have some questions. We're going to have dialogue. We're going to interrupt each other a bit when we have things to say. So I'd like to start with David Uribe. He is a senior consultant for UNESCO, and he supports strategic initiatives on open solutions, including Diamond Open Access, open data, and OER. David, I thought you might just sort of kick us off, talk a little bit about the models, the frameworks that you've been thinking about and working with around open access.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And well, I think today we have a very great opportunity to see many of the synergies that education and science have together, because at the end they are interconnected and they depend on each other. So there is no excellent science if there is not excellent education. And we cannot foster education if we don't have very good results on science. In terms of open access, I think we have been discussing in the last day and today about the need to share communication, to share knowledge, and especially that it's very relevant for science. One of the still an issue in the scientific community is that sometimes or many times the reports of scientific results or the scientific communication is not seen as an integral part of the research. So sometimes it's seen as a separate activity, while it's one of the most important actions. Even when now researchers, they are getting research grants and so on, and sometimes they complain about filling out a report. But this is part of the research. The communication with the community is part of the research. And what we aim now is to make science available, science that can be reached everywhere. And in the last presentation, it was mentioned also how it's important to to reestablish trust in science. And of course, the scientific communication publishing models plays a very important role. Many of you are in the community of open access, and especially on the different history about the models. But what I think is more important now today to discuss is the aim. So what we really want is to aim to achieve a truly open access for scientific communication. And of course, this depends on different models, and models can be seen and interpreted in a very different regions. At the moment, what we are seeing is that a model that is fostering equitable scholarly communication, that is providing the possibility to be truly open from the side of the user and the beneficiary. So it means that has no barriers, including financial barriers for readers and for authors, is what is being called Diamond Open Access. Of course, Diamond Open Access has not been always a model that has been understood or interpreted as that, because the history of open access has been developed differently regionally. There are regions where they have started with repositories, or they have been professionalized more into a really publishing models that they called open access. In some other regions, they have been calling Diamond Open Access. But in the case of this model of Diamond Open Access, that not only allows now the possibility to present a high quality scholarly communication model, but also allows to align to many of the values that are presented in the recommendation of open science. So first of all, it's community owned, community led. So that means that it needs a lot of involvement on public and nonprofit funding. And of course, one of the things that are seen with Diamond Open Access is that knowledge is a public good, and for that they need to protect bibliodiversity and multilingual publishing. So this is one of the things that are very important. And Diamond Open Access is really strongly sustained on licensing. So those who are expert in Diamond Open Access publishings, they really establish what are the licenses, and it's the same concept as in OER. No, if it's not an open license, it's not simply Diamond Open Access. And of course, that embeds a lot of requirements and challenges, but still has a lot of benefits. For example, to have persistent identifiers, clear metadata, and that permits traceability to contribute to metrics. And of course, the Diamond Open Access now is also giving the possibility to foster more regional cooperation and share services. So one example are the different services that you can find in Latin America, but also, for example, a new case is the European Diamond Capacity Hub. And this European Diamond Capacity Hub is bringing the possibility to unite national efforts, national capacity centers, and bringing into the discussion with public funders the need to have digital public infrastructure. And this digital public infrastructure can be really aligned to foster also actions, for example, in open educational resources. So we are seeing many similarities, synergies, and the aim is similar.
Thank you. I want to actually just give an example from a project that we've been working with. As I mentioned, we build open libraries. OER Commons is one that you may have heard of. We run a couple of dozen of these libraries, but we started a few years ago an open source community-led project called the Open Metadata Exchange, or OME. If you look on GitHub, you can find it. And some of the early work was taking the metadata. It's basically a mesh network. So it's not a one place where you go. It's a way to connect other repositories of open educational resources. But what I want to say, and what I think is so related to what you're just talking about, the infrastructure, is one of the first groups that came to us was an organization called BioQuest, and they had a lot of science data. And they had it in different repositories for science, not for OER, for open science and open data. And sometimes the project funding would end and then they didn't have a home for it, so they'd have to scurry to find a new home for the data. Or sometimes they wanted to actually work with educators because this idea that this great research that scientists are involved in, how do you take that and translate that into actually making an open educational resource? So really taking this loop between science to education, and then of course those who are working in education are feeding back what they're learning from teaching it back to science. So it created this loop, and we said, there's really a need to have a kind of network where open science, open data, and open education are actually in conversation with each other, right? And that's just one example of infrastructure that is starting to be built at this time. And there's also, you mentioned about funding, funding comes from foundations or the EU or philanthropy. And I know that's a concern. In fact, Zeynep, we've talked about this before too, where if funding just comes from a project, is that enough to build big infrastructure? And I'm going to make the case that in this day and age, any kind of project like that, it's okay if it's distributed. It's okay if it's funded with private funding or foundation or philanthropy funding, but it needs to be open. It needs to be open access. We need to be sharing data. The content must be portable and interoperable. That's the most important piece of this. And in these kinds of, I like that term mesh networks, both from a technical perspective, but also if you just think about how something can work in a distributed fashion, I think that's where we need to move to. I love some of these examples we've seen of big government infrastructure. It's so powerful what you can do there. But I actually think the power in the end is going to come from very distributed networks that are able to bring this work together. I wanted to actually move to our next speaker. Tell you just a little bit about her. So Mpine Makoe, she is a scholar and leader in the field of technology and is currently the executive dean of the College of Education and the National Research Foundation at the University of South Africa. And she was the chairholder of the Commonwealth of Learning and Open Educational Practices and Resources. So she brings quite extensive work thinking about what does this really look like when we're implementing this kind of model on the ground. Mpine.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. I think a lot has been said about open education, and we all know why we are here as scientists, also as teachers and as researchers. We are all here to impact the society we serve. And most of the time when we talk about our things, but knowledge has to find its way to teaching, and teaching has to find its way to research, and research has to find its way to the community it serves. So it's that loop that is very important. And I want to bring in the third element, which is the community. In open education spaces, it's easy for us to go to the community when we want to develop a study material, but we don't include them to come in and develop it with us, to work together with us, so that whatever that we are doing, it's open in a real sense of the word. Over the years, I have been in open education movement for many, many years. And all we're doing is just to get people to buy into open education resources because it's free, because of all the things, the wonderful things that open education resources has to offer, especially in developing countries like ours, where it's important for people to get textbooks, but if they have to buy textbook, then it's added cost and all those things. But still, that didn't work. It's working, but not to an extent of what we anticipated in the beginning. It makes sense to us, but it doesn't make sense to other people who we want to impact. And that's why we brought in a project where we are working with the community as people, as custodians of knowledges, to share knowledge with us, to share what we could teach. And we find that when you bring in people, we bring in students, we also bring in students as well, then you are dealing with a different status. Because what we have done in the education sector has been heavily hierarchical. It has been the people who know to the people who don't know. And in the process, we leave out a whole lot of people who actually knows much, much better than we do. Yesterday, we were listening to Maggie talking about indigenous knowledge systems. In cultures where indigenous knowledge systems are so separated from the formal teaching and learning, you find yourself in a schizophrenic environment where when you are in this environment, you behave like this, and then when you get home, in a localized environment, it's a different story altogether. And we won't find the localized knowledge coming into the formal systems or the formal education system if we don't move out and get that localized, not only as research, but also as participants. And it goes back to the principles of open education. The principles of open education deals a lot with issues of participation, collaboration, issues of sharing of resources, solidarity, collective responsibilities. And if we were true to ourselves in openness, when we are doing open access, open science, and we are talking about issues of openness, these principles are of common good. And openness is about common good, as well as it is about public good. And common good means that we have to work together as a community to ensure that what we produce, it's what will have impact in the society, not only to the elite, but to the society at large. The society should be able to see themselves in the curriculum. They should be able to see themselves in science as they are, not as the way we interpret them to be, or the way we think that teaching and learning should be. So that for us in developing contexts, it's important, because unless we do that, we won't find our way in the AI. We know that algorithms and machine learning is something that has been taught the machines to do. And even if I can just ask AI now, what is African education? It starts with formal education started by colonizers doing this and doing that and doing that. It doesn't talk, it looks like there was nothing before colonizers stepped in. So it's important for us as well to, when we are doing these things and we consider ourselves as open scholars, we need also to be open in a real sense of the word in order for us to impact not only the elite, but all the community at large. Thank you.
Thank you so much. David, I'm wondering, when we talk about open access and we hear these stories from not just South Africa, but from the global South, are there ways that we could really broaden that open science infrastructure to include open education in there? Do you have some ideas about that, or things that you've seen?
Well, I think Zeynep stated very good on the example that knowledge has to be considered for governments the same as a public good as, for example, having water or any other resource. And of course, just for the specific case of water, the fact that you have it is not means that you can use it. So you need infrastructure. So infrastructure is an enabler to be able to use that resource, and that means that in order to allow these two components of open science, of open access, to be more impactful into open science. One of the things that is very important is, of course, that governments can consider publishing infrastructures also as a public infrastructure. So it needs to be invested in that. And also to foster these regional actions allows to have a better preservation. And also has to be considered that in this era of AI, one of the main discussions about is how the new machine learning models are acquiring the knowledge without giving any credit to the source where it was taken up. Of course, that also depends or has a lot of impact on the publishing model where the science is given. So with Diamond Open Access, there is an opportunity through the openness in the licensing, in the metadata, of course, to have a better traceability about what are the sources. And so if AI models are training, for example, for open science with resources that are published on Diamond on models like Diamond Open Access, it could give a better possibility to have a real traceability of where is the source coming from. It is reliable. It will build more trust in that sense.
Right. Yeah, it seems so much so that those same principles we're talking about, whether it's provenance or security or trust, those are the exact same kind of values or ethos of open education, right? I think we see a lot of similarity across them. Zeynep, I'm thinking about the two key recommendations that have come from UNESCO. First, the first OER recommendation, and then later the Dubai recommendation. And are you seeing the combination there? Those conversations, did they obviously talked about open education and these issues around equity and whatnot, but do you see a way that those, or how are you seeing those sort of transfer into the open access realm, or where's the connection that you're finding?
So the question is,
So there's been two remarkable declarations from UNESCO, if you haven't seen them. So look at the recommendation on OER and then the one from Dubai. And
how would it translate to?
how are they translating to this open access? We're working here to try to make this loop, not close the loop, but create this loop between open access, open data, and open education.
Okay. In terms of there was the recommendation in 2019, and this was the instrument that was adopted by the member states down to the last comma, like the open science recommendation adopted in 21. Then the declaration was guidance to this document. And I think one of the issues, I didn't say it during my presentation, but the main point is that while the recommendation talked about teachers and learners and the larger community of humans involved, whether they be in communication information or in library science, etc., the declaration recognized a third party in this marriage, if you like, which is artificial intelligence. And what this third party, how would this third party what would have to be done? Because now there's three. And in terms of the links, I think these are the common challenges for open access. This is just a common challenge for everything to do with knowledge. And I think it's bigger than looking at OER and open access. It's really looking about knowledge and how we can best profit from everything that's going on at a time when there are limited resources overall, and there is a greater and greater need for knowledge to be useful for nothing less than our survival as a species. So I think it's really important that we are able to work and recognize the value of being able to share learning openly so that we can move forward in an intelligent manner as a planet, and to be able to share science for the same end, and that these feed off each other properly. And it doesn't stop here. The open solutions work in itself includes other openly licensed things, free and open source software, open data, for example. I think this is really the time where we have to really move forward to consolidate all the good things we have. In terms of the links, we have in the OER recommendation, we talk about sustainability. Open access, you've got that already. I think, in my opinion, it's very well. You have the infrastructure there for the sharing of scholarly communications. This is something which is really well developed and organized. It's something that could be very useful for open educational resources to see as a model of what really could work when you do it in a very systematic manner. In terms of OER, there is a huge heterogeneity of knowledge and of resources that are done for formal, informal, K-12, tertiary, higher education, all sorts of learning environments, all sorts of different stakeholders, as Professor Mpine also just said, from the community, from the different teachers, from learners producing resources. There's a whole wide level of experiences that can be learned from in terms of producing knowledge and making it something which we're all confident is useful, and then to build from there. So I think there's the possibilities are endless. It's just the doors have to be opened.
Well, on that note, I love that. Thank you. What are the challenges to connecting these opens and to sort of moving forward in this way, either ones that we've experienced specifically, or what are some things that we're anticipating or that we've seen? And the question's open for anybody. Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. I think one of the biggest challenges is the change that is taking place in higher education in the world. And the change is so drastic and dramatic. 1 minute we are dealing with this matter, and then AI stepped in, and now we are running after AI, and simply because we don't understand or even know what this is all about. We are finding ourselves in this changing environment that no one prepared us for. Even when open education came into the space, it had to deal with traditional universities that had been there for 400 years. And now changes are not only happening in 400 years, they are happening in 5 years and in 5 months. And, 1 minute you are here, the next minute you are at the next level. And technology has made all these things possible for us. And hence, we need to start rethinking different education system that we want. And it's definitely not going to be the education system that we're familiar with. Higher education in general has been criticized a lot for not being responsive to the society it serves, for the communities it serves. And part of the reason is that we are the last group of people to change anything. And we continue to go on with what we think it's comfortable or what we know, rather than trying to change and keep abreast with all the things that are happening. Our survival really as higher education institutions is that we need to step out of our comfort zone a little bit and not be custodians of knowledge, because we are not. Knowledge is available everywhere and anyway. And that's why I said AI came in and it became such an issue because it questioned the way we assess. We want people to sit like rows, the way you are sitting there, and we want them to do certain things in a certain manner. And now with all the information that is available in the tip of your finger, it becomes very difficult for us to control or support that. So it's important for us to open up accessibility of our resources and services to the community, to ourselves, to provide even much more flexible formats of learning, using open education resources, open education sciences to develop programs, to develop and to capacitate ourselves, because that's another level that we think that we have arrived and we don't have to relearn new things. And also try to reach out to those communities, our students and other people, the different types of targets. And let's reach out to them and see how we can build the education system of 2050, something that we can't even imagine right now. And it's going to happen. Things have changed over the years. Pandemics have forced us to even study on our own in our corners. So it's those things that are really of interest in the education space and also that are questioning the way we have been doing business for a very, very long time. So it's time to really open up as we are talking about openness, because we cannot run an open system in a closed system. Thank you.
Did you want to comment also, David?
Yeah, sure. I think in the last panel was mentioned, and I think it was addressed also with a very smart question about how to change a system like research where it is strongly based on individual merits. And it was addressed the topic that, well, of the importance of changing the assessment for research. And it was also mentioned that it's unavoidable to see the competition. I don't see a problem with the competition. I think the problem is that we have to reorient who is the competitor. And the competitor should not be among us. It should be against the problems we want to solve. So that's an issue that, of course, if we want to give elements for recognition of the researchers doing their work, we also have to implement those infrastructure and resources for the researchers that can allow them to have trust in that system, that even if they are working on teams and they are working on collaborative efforts, still their individual effort is recognized. And that's why it's so important to foster open and transparent publishing models. And this is a chance that Diamond Open Access has. Because, of course, the way it's conceived and the way it has been crafted and it has been mature allows that Diamond Open Access can be really seen as a transparent publishing model that makes very easy to check and verify. And the standards that they are built on now and the identifiers can not only connect the resource itself, the scientific communication, but also can connect it to the sources and the data and the methods, which makes more valuable a scientific communication. It can be based on that. And additionally, actions that are happening now on regional capacities for Diamond Open Access, they are not considering just the traditional communication of the journals. So they are fostering a whole range of communications. So in this case that I mentioned of the Diamond European Diamond Capacity Hub, so they are fostering how to place on Diamond Open Access standards, preprints, books. So it's going beyond the scientific communication, and that will allow, of course, to have a better alignment with open educational resources.
Did you want to add anything about the challenges, Zeynep?
I think I repeat what or echo what's been said earlier. It's the mindset. It's to be able to see things as possible and as desirable. And once that happens, I think everything is possible. But in order to do that, there's a need for an understanding as to why we have to do that. And I think I'd just like to point out something. The recommendation on OER was in 2019, and it was relatively, it was seen as, it wasn't a very, it was just the normal process that took place. And it was November, it was adopted. In January 2020, we had the pandemic. By May 2020, everybody had discovered, the whole world discovered e-learning. And suddenly open educational resources were really up there. It was very important. Digital learning was important. We got through the pandemic. In November 2023 was generative AI came out. And 2021, and 2021 was open science, and I think there was more discussion on open science. It was during COVID and digital when science was at the forefront. And then in 2023, there was generative AI that came out. And today we're 2025, and it's really just, everything is exponential. And I just very quickly, the math, it's 6 years I'm talking about. 6 years. If the world is going so fast, then the institutions have to at least stay at pace, if not have a little bit faster of a run if possible. Really, we have to pick up the pace of the thinking because the technology is going. And just one last thing, David was talking to me about the relationship between innovation and science and what happens. So perhaps that could be just, if you'd allow.
Well, we were preparing our panel, and we were also discussing about the challenges. Of course, the message that we want to bring here is that you could also see the interconnection that has OER with open access and in the frame, of course, with open science, because there are risks. And one of the risks, for example, is what it happens with open innovation. So open innovation was a very, very big trend topic before 2020, and it was one of the greatest flagship, for example, of the European Union in the framework program Horizon 2020, which one of the pillars was open innovation. But in a certain way, open innovation was not very well linked to what is needed, that was open science. So if we need to do excellent innovation, we need excellent research. But if we need excellent research, we need excellent education. So we have to take into account that circle.
Yeah, thank you for that. It just kind of reminds me of the early days of open education. We're talking 20 years ago. Many of us really understood this to be a transformation of teaching and learning. The fact that you could have peer knowledge being created, co-created, that you could have student involvement in the production of content for courses, so that it was really very transformational. And kind of what we heard from the education field itself, not the open education field, was, no, that's way too scary. You can't go in with this new idea of open and say it's going to transform teaching and learning, because it's changing, it's threatening the very existence of what that system is, which I think is what you were saying earlier. We used to sort of think of it as like the Trojan horse. If we just get open education into these institutions, that will actually change. But I think we've seen that in some cases, certainly. But I think the big gain or the big win is when we are connecting it to open science, to open innovation. Imagine if, those of you who were talking in the last, when you're asking questions in the last panel, well, I'm working here in academia and this is how we do things and it's competition. Well, imagine if all of you and us were sort of raised in a system of education where open education was the norm. Then all of a sudden you have us in universities or in other kinds of training where we're already saying, well, of course it's open. Why, what? It's not open, right? Like that's the default that we really want to get to. I'm thinking about time. Is it time to start asking questions? I'd love to open the floor up. How are we doing? All right. What was that? Yeah, let's open it up to questions. Yes. Hi.
Hi, I'm Ivan from the DOAJ, the Directory of Open Access Journals, and thank you very much for your presentations and insights. They were very, very interesting. And I have a question for David regarding Diamond Journal versus the journals that are charging APCs and are not these like big commercial publishers journals that charge like over $3,000 or more. There are these type of journals that are charging APCs or costs, contributions to publication costs, as Cielo named those charges. And these are in my view, fair. There are some journals that charge like $50, $30, or $100, and they say that they charge these fees to contribute to the costs of publication, to survive, basically. And this is because, I think throughout all these years, we haven't convinced research funders to invest more in journals. So the journals have found this solution. But again, they are not necessarily these high APC journals. So my question is, what are your views and your thoughts about it? Because in regions like in Latin America, this trend is increasing. And of course, I'm not very convinced about it, but I also understand the situation of these journals.
Well, one of the things that we have to see is that the aim that we are looking is to have equitable scholarly publishing system, that it's accessible, that the knowledge can be shared. And this has a very specific characteristics from the publishing model, that it has to be barrier-free for the authors and readers. Of course, in between, to achieve that, we have to consider there is a lot of work, and that work demands resources, and resources demands cost. What is aim is also to bring this dialogue, of course, to the decision takers, to understand that in order to have a publishing or scholarly communication system that can allow to the knowledge to be shared, especially those, the public funders and the public research, the public funded research needs to be communicated in a publishing model that can allow those values, and that also can allow multilingualism, that allows also to integrate into the knowledge system to those underrepresented groups. So that means that I think that the discussion is not so focused on having the cost, but is in fostering the model that can allow, again, the readers and the authors to have a transparent system. And I think also is not a fight against commercial or non-commercial. It's about transparency, because at the end, What it costs a computer, it costs a computer. But it has to be transparent. Why it costs that, why it has to be bought, and how it's going to be used. So I think this is the current trend. So at UNESCO, we conduct a global consultation. We ask from July to January, July 24 to January 25th, to those who voluntarily wants to contribute on what they are believe about the challenges they're facing, the benefits they experience, and this consultation was very well accepted, and we got more than 2,900 responses. We had more than 3,000 open-ended comments. So we got a lot of information from 92 countries. And this allows to see that, of course, there is a very wide diversity in the interpretation about what an open access model should be. But there is still coincide on be transparent, and to have, of course, the support of the public funders, so that the public funders can sustain a publishing model where the readers and the authors can have a space for them, and that this is preserved. So that's why if you need preservation, you'll need long-term investment, so you need infrastructure. So, but that doesn't mean that the public organism needs to perform everything. So it might need support from third parties, but still the question is not about if it has a cost or not. It's about being transparent and that everything aligns with the standards. And the standards will define what is the right cost and who has to cover it.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hey, hello. I'm Luisa. I'm a GUA member and also the president of the Brazilian chapter of OSD, and also the president of the Brazilian Association of Ecological Science and Conservation. And follow up on what Mpine was talking about, like in the northeastern part of Brazil, we are moving forward with the creation of Brazil's first indigenous university, the Centro de Saberes Tenterrar, which aims to integrate traditional and scientific knowledge within indigenous territory. And its development plan has been co-created with indigenous communities to guarantee that that the university will embrace their needs and also like their different types of knowledge. So in the context of open science and open education, I wonder what's your opinion on how can we ensure that the inclusion of indigenous epistemologies happens in a way that is both collaborative and respectful without reproducing extractive or colonial dynamics. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, because then we are getting the community that we serve into the fray. And when you get people into our space, you have to allow them to be themselves. And the only way, and that way they will contribute effectively. But if you are going to say this is how we're doing things, then it defeats the purpose of what they are supposed to be doing. So you need to in my view, if you want communities to participate, allow them to participate fully, allow and respect what they are bringing into the table, because that's what is important. That's what openness is all about. You don't know certain things about maybe indigenous medicine, but they do, and they bring in that. And as scientists, you can sit down with them and write and work together, not only getting stuff from them and not not giving back. So I think it's a very an important way of doing and working with the community, because higher education, universities in particular, mine is sitting on the hill. And for you to be anywhere, you have to go up the hill. So we need to flatten that hill a bit so that people can have access to education, so that they are able to buy into it and make them feel that they are part of this bigger system that we want to create. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe I just want to complement the question, because you mentioned it very good. It has to be a priority to understand that knowledge is everywhere and can come from everybody. In the case, for example, of Mexico, Mexico just adopted a new national policy on science and technology. And there is a special part where it recognizes traditional engineers' knowledge as part of the scientific system. And the most curious thing is that the great opposition to that was the scientist. So it has to be a lot of conscious in the discussion about that knowledge can be found everywhere. Recognize the value that not all the knowledge, or the knowledge as we understand, sometimes obey for everywhere. Because the traditional knowledge of many indigenous regions in Mexico, it works for the well-being of their community. And it has to be protected, it has to be shared, it has to be fostered. And there's a big change. But of course, the great opposition was the most surprising thing is that came from the scientific community in Mexico. To recognize that indigenous knowledge was considered part of the scientific system.
I just want to add one thing there, just to iterate also something we heard yesterday. This is also why in open education, there's a concern about licenses, because if you use a license that is completely free for commercial use, then it becomes very extractive, the kind of knowledge that's created and then made into open educational resources. So we don't want a model where extraction happens in those communities. I think you have a question from online.
Thank you. To this point, we have a question online from, yes. Within the framework of open science and the human right to participate in the production and enjoyment of knowledge, as recognized in instruments such as the Pact for the Future and UNESCO's recommendation on open science, how should governments, educational institutions, and communities of practice design and implement open licensing policies, such as Creative Commons or other models, in education and educational resources to simultaneously ensure financial sustainability, equitable access, local adaptability, and respect for copyright and creators' incentives? There's a lot packed in there.
There's a lot in there. Do you want to start there, Zeynep?
I know where my glasses are, though. I think very clear to answer and very succinctly, use an open license. Make sure that you know what you're doing and make sure that you use the license that you want to use. I think the Creative Commons is the most commonly used open license. Therefore, it has the advantage of being, it has a large, there's a lot of resources that are already there. It's internationally recognized. And if you were to use a Creative Commons license, go on the site, educate yourself on the licensing and what you're doing. So that's would be my.
And I think there are still some interesting conversations that we need to have as a field around open licensing for these reasons, for the reasons that we talked about with indigenous knowledge and these models of commercialization and how they benefit or don't benefit the fields of open. I think it's time we have some more honest conversations about what that looks like. Just in the early days of open, we found people using the most permissive of licenses. And what was happening then is the commercial publishers and the textbook publishers would actually take that content and then publish it and sell it. And some people would say, well, don't you want that knowledge out there? Right now it's being more broadly used. But the issue is that these were people who had created this content. They didn't get paid for it. Maybe they had philanthropy paid for it. And now the beneficiaries of it, it was now being sold to others. Very similar to some of the conversations we heard yesterday too around AI. If the information that is our data, that we should have control over, is then taken, absorbed, and then sold back to us, there's a real parallel there. And I think we need to start having some conversations, and maybe some uncomfortable conversations, about what that looks like. I think we have time for one more question. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Peter Elias. I'm from the University of Lagos, and I work with citizen science. Now we have had some improvement in working with communities to co-produce knowledge. But one area that I think we should also be interested in is, how do we ensure that knowledge produced by community researchers can be integrated or openly published in scientific journals? She said that we cannot do open science in a closed system. The knowledge being produced locally, how can it make entry into scientific journals? So that, just like we use communities to validate scientific findings, innovations, and others, can scientists also validate local knowledge and publicly, allow them into scientific journal for wider communication?
You both want to say something? Go ahead. Do you want to start, Mpine?
Okay, I hear what you're saying, and we tend to think that community members, when they contribute to knowledge, they're outsiders of that knowledge. And usually what we do, we go interview them and do all sorts of things, collect information from them, and we don't include them in our when we write. It's about us when all is said and done. But if you co-produce with them, you are empowering them as well to be part of this community, the scientific community, because that is their knowledge. And half the time when we get information from them through interviews and all these things, as people who give us information, we don't attribute it back to them. But if we co-produce with them, we definitely are going to be, they are going to be scientists, because what they've produced is science. What they are telling you or what they are writing is science. They're going to be scientists. So why are we not giving them that opportunity of becoming scientists? Thank you.
David, do you have a quick comment?
Yes, of course. Of course, we are also stating quite often about how OER and open access can be seen as an infrastructure that allows knowledge to be a real public good. And this requires also the right tools. So usually what you mentioned is the case for many regions. Local knowledge, they face, I think one of the biggest problems they face is that it's generated in the local language. And you need a publishing model that allows multilingualism. Multilingualism not only because this knowledge can be shared in the original knowledge, but also if one specific community wants to know what maybe another community in the world has done to tackle their local problem, the information will only be found in the language of the other community. So you need a system that allows a publishing model that allows multilingualism, that allows accessibility. And well, this is some of the characteristics of the potentials that in this case, for example, Diamond Open Access is promoting. And promoting that small communities can create their knowledge, share it there, and share it in a multilingual way. That's maybe a comment.
Thank you. Megs, do we have time for one more question? We don't. I'm so sorry. Will you come up afterwards and we can find out what your question was? Okay.
Thank you.
Zeynep, did you want to make one final closing comment?
Very quickly, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for thinking through this, and we hope that we can continue this discussion. And thank you for this opportunity to present.
Thank you. And thank
you,
you
everyone.
for your questions. I'm sorry we didn't have time for them all. Okay, so it is now my privilege to welcome you to go and take your lunch. And I will look forward to seeing everyone return at no later than 1400, but I'll start getting things started a few minutes before. So please enjoy your lunch, and we will look forward to seeing you this afternoon.